Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 2024 Ordinary Council meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality, and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, we turn to item 1, which is the declaration of opening. Welcome, everyone. I declare this meeting open at 1 minute past 6 p.m. Item 2 is a disclaimer. The City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the presiding member, that's me. There's no such announcements this evening. Item 4 is attendance. Item 4.1 is apologies. I haven't received any apologies for this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence. And I have, there is Councillor Glenn Cridland has been granted an approved leave of absence for the period of 18 May 2024 to 30 May 2024 inclusive. Item 5 is declarations of interest. There's a few here, so bear with me. Councillor Bronwyn Moore has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as in 2019 I acted for a client on a matter involving the sale of its business to Amana Living, and in addition the firm of which I am a director advised a local government in respect of a matter involving Amana Living. Mayor Greg Milner, that's me. I've declared a financial proximity and impartiality interest in item 10.3.3 as some of the proposed listings either include or are adjacent to or are across the road from properties that are owned or indirectly owned by persons who contributed to my re-election campaign in 2023. Councillor Mary Choi has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.3 as some of the local heritage survey nominees are known to me. Councillor Hayley Prendeville has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.3 as one of the nominated persons for the local heritage survey review is known to me as a neighbour, and Councillor Bronwyn Moore has declared a proximity interest in item 10.3.6 as I live on Mary Street within proximity of number 45 Mary Street, Como. Councillors, does anyone have any other declarations that they wish to make this evening? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. An impartiality interest with respect to 10.3.3. I know someone who is not closely associated to me as a person, but whose property is on the heritage survey. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillors, any other declarations of interest? No, okay. That brings us to item 6, which is public question time. Item 6.1 is responses to previous questions taken on notice. That's nil this evening. Item 6.2 is public question time itself. So I now open public question time at 4 minutes past 6 p.m. We have received 4 written submissions prior to tonight's meeting. And I'd like to begin by inviting Mr. Bill Gleeson of South Perth, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Mr Mayor, councillors, thank you. Preamble. As a ratepayer of the City of South Perth, I support item 10.3.3 Local Heritage Survey and congratulate Samantha Taylor, Senior Planning Officer. This document is 100 years of early history relating to architectural design of commercial and residential buildings in the City of South Perth. I urge councillors to support the item 10.3.3. Question 1. Are you aware this document is part of the link between the honour boards and photos of the history of South Perth? By chance, I have a personal interest in 4 of these items listed. I grew up in 40 Hovia Terrace. 2. I took the photo of the Hurlingham Picture Gardens and barbershop and served my apprenticeship in the barbershop. At night, I was the ice cream boy selling ice creams in the picture theatre. 3. I was married in St Martin's Church. 4. I managed the Moresby Street Hall for 20 years as a volunteer. I strongly urge the council to support 10.3.3. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Gleeson. Ms Shaw, can I send that one your way?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you. The City appreciates your feedback and will pass on comments to the officers involved in drafting the local heritage survey, and I know Sam will be pleased to hear that. She's put a lot of work into it. The City is aware that the document is associated with the cultural heritage of the district, as are the honour boards.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Mr Gleeson, for the question.
What was the question? Sorry, don't mind.
Your question?
No. Sorry. It wasn't a question for me to answer. I just didn't catch it.
Ms Shaw, would you like to repeat?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, we are aware that the honour boards are associated with the cultural heritage of the district.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Mr Gleeson. I think that was the only question you had?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd now like to invite Dr Mark Brogan of Kensington. Welcome to you. We look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors and City of South Perth staff. My question this evening concerns underground power for Kensington, the subject of a ratepayer petition in 2023 and included in the underground power program for City of South Perth. In response to a public question at an electors' general meeting held on the 6th of February 2024, City of South Perth provided an update on the project, inclusive of the following milestone status reports and completion dates for the delivery of underground power to Kensington. A. Detailed design by Western Power. Status said to be completed as of 6th of February 2024. B. Delivery of construction feasibility review and draft funding agreement. Status said to be incomplete and in progress on February 6, 2024. C. Council endorsement of a final funding agreement and fees. Status incomplete, projected in current financial year, that is before the 30th of June 2024. D. Construction. Status yet to commence, projected to commence early in the financial year 2024-25 with a completion period of 12 to 15 months. Conditional on Council voting to adopt the final funding agreement and fees, that is C. E. Issuance of notices of fees and charges. Status yet to be issued, projected to be issued in July 2025 if adopted in the financial year 25-26 budget. And my question, would the City advise any changes to project milestones, completion status or completion dates since the February 2024 update on the Kensington Underground Power Project?
Thank you for the question. Ms Amprimo.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. The latest advice from Western Power is that they expect to complete the cost estimate and construction feasibility now by the end of June 2024. Based on this information, the revised timeframe and progress updates will be as follows. The detailed design by Western Power is already complete, as noted. The construction feasibility review and cost estimate will be next month, June 2024. The draft funding agreement has been substantially negotiated between the parties, but is dependent on inclusion of the final costs into the agreement. That would result in it being presented to council in no later than September 2024, the Ordinary Council meeting in September, for endorsement, and then construction is scheduled to commence in the mid-24-25 financial year, with a construction period of 12 to 15 months, conditional on council voting to adopt the funding agreement. And that would leave the notices being issued as part of the fees and charges in July 2025, as if they're adopted in the 25-26 annual budget.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo, and thank you, Dr Brogan, for the question. I'd now like to invite Mr Barry Drake of South Perth. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
My name's Barry Drake, live at Unit 3, Number 2, Scenic Crescent, South Perth. Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors, officers, good evening, members of the gallery and everybody listening on YouTube out there, good evening. Question number 1. Last year, I paid $73,568 in council rates to the City of South Perth. And you told me last month that Wesley College paid nothing. Last year, I paid $72,480 in land tax. How much land tax did Wesley College pay last year?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
Mr Drake, the city does not administer land tax, so that question needs to be directed to the Office of State Revenue because they administer land tax, not the city.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Your second question, Mr Drake.
Is that a you don't know? Anyway, okay, expected that answer, thank you. Question 2. If all landowners in the City of South Perth paid council rates, would it be possible to reduce the rate burden on residential property owners, which would have the effect of reducing rental rents, or the rents on those properties?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
So if all the landowners that are currently exempt paid council rates, it would likely result in a lower rate in the dollar, having the flow-on effect of reducing the rate burden on their individual properties that are currently paying rates. So that's correct.
Yes.
However, it should be noted that rental charges are determined by market demand. Therefore, it's unlikely that lower rates would have any significant impact on rental charges.
Well,
Thank
I can
you,
tell you it certainly would. Anyway, we'll move on to question number 3.
Very good.
Does the council, councillors here, agree with Wesley College relocating its sporting facilities to Sir James Mitchell Park so that they can build income-producing properties on their sporting fields?
Thank you. Mr Adams.
That's not a question that's currently before council, and it's not a question that can be answered in this forum. So if you want answers from individual councillors, I suggest that you email them directly.
Thank you, Mr Adams,
Just
and
so long
thank you,
as
Mr
there's
Drake.
an awareness there, that's, thank you very
Mr.
much,
Drake.
Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillors, thank you.
Okay, I'd now like to invite Ms Bronwyn David of South Perth. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Good evening. Good evening, councillors. Good evening, administrative staff. I'm before you again to talk about the Heritage Survey. Whilst I understand that the motion before council tonight is simply to agree to advertise the heritage survey for feedback, I'd like to get a jump on the future debate about specifics and seek more information about the entry in the survey for 44 Angelo Street, South Perth. My first question is that there is a statement in the record for 44 Angelo Street, South Perth in the Heritage Survey that, and I quote, a moderate extent of fabric remains in its original state at the property. I'd be pleased to have details as to how this statement was arrived at.
Thank you. Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the description was based on several sources, including property records, site inspections and photos. The comment speaks to the overall intactness of the dwelling, whilst also acknowledging that it has been modified over the years, including the sleep out, sunroom and carport additions during 1950, 1987 and 1996 respectively.
Thank you. My second question is whether the council regards it as inconsistent that the only commercial building designed by Talbot Hobbs in the city of South Perth, the Windsor Hotel, has long had the highest local heritage status available, partly on the basis of Talbot Hobbs' association with it and partly on the rarity of the building style within the municipality. And yet the only identifiable domestic building by Talbot Hobbs, and also a rare example of its type, is not recommended for the highest level of protection in the draft survey.
Thank you. Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No. The Windsor Hotel is Category A place, which is equivalent to a Category 1 under the new Local Heritage Survey framework. And that was on the basis of its aesthetic, historic and social value, being representative of the Federation filigree style use and association with the early development of suburban housing south of the river in the late 1890s, as well as the commercial architecture of J.J. Talbot Hobbs, as you've identified. 44 Angelo Street does hold aesthetic value and is representative of residential architecture by WA architecture firm Hobbs, Forbes and Partners. It is not considered to be equal to that of the Windsor Hotel, and that's primarily due to the social association. Notwithstanding, it is open for council to modify the proposed Category 3 level to a higher category prior to advertising or following advertising of the draft Local Heritage Survey.
Thank you. My third question is whether the council considers it may be disheartening to those individuals who submitted heritage application that so few have been recommended to receive a level of classification high enough to actually afford protection to those nominated places.
Thank you. Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Local Heritage Survey in itself does not provide any statutory or legal protection in a planning sense. The Local Heritage Survey helps local governments make decisions that reflect local heritage values and supports the creation of the Heritage List or Heritage Area, which identify places for protection under the local planning scheme. The Heritage List will be provided to Council to consider following review of the Local Heritage Survey.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Ms David, for the questions.
Thank you.
I'll just check in with governance to see if there's any late questions. No, there's not. Okay. In that case, I now close public question time at 18 minutes past 6 p.m. That brings us to item 7, which is the confirmation of minutes and notes. Item 7.1 is minutes. Item 7.1.1 is the ordinary council meeting held 23 April 2024. So I'll seek a mover and then a seconder that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held 23 April 2024 be taken as read and confirmed as a true and correct record. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Someone to second. Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No. Okay. Then I'll use my powers under the standing orders to declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.2 is the notes of briefing. So I'm about to call for a mover that council notes the following council briefings and workshops were held. 7.2.1, concept briefings and workshops. 7.2.2, council agenda briefing, 21 May 2024. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Councillor Brenda Abrandis to second, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No. Okay. In that case, once again, I'll use my powers under the standing orders to declare that carried unanimously. That brings us to item 8, which is presentations. Item 8.1 is petitions. That's nil for this evening. Item 8.2 is gifts or awards presented to council. That's nil for this evening. And item 8.3 is deputations. And deputations were heard at the council agenda briefing held on 21 May 2024. That brings us to item 9, which is method of dealing with agenda business. I'll now seek confirmation from the Acting Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Gary Adams, that all the report items contained in tonight's agenda were discussed at the May Council agenda briefing. Mr. Adams.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. With the exception of those items to be withdrawn for discussion, reports will be adopted by exception resolution. And by this, I mean that the officer recommendation will be adopted as is, without discussion or amendment. The following items have been withdrawn for discussion this evening. Item 10.3.1, major land transaction, Collier Park Village and contract of sale. The reason for that is an absolute majority is required. Item 10.3.3, local heritage survey review. The reason for that is I've declared a financial proximity and impartiality interest in that item. Item 10.3.6, proposed change of use, multiple dwellings to holiday accommodation. Lot 2, number 2 of 45, Mary Street, Como. The reason for that is Councillor Bronwyn Waugh has declared a proximity interest and Councillor Jennifer Navard has an amended motion. And item 10.3.7, which is response to notice of motion, hooning and along the peninsula. The reason for that is Councillor Coveney has an amended motion. Councillors, does anyone wish to withdraw any other items for discussion this evening? And that's a no. Okay. So, I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following items by exception resolution. Those are item 10.3.2, local planning policies, final adoption. Item 10.3.4, proposed change of use, single house to holiday house. Lot 352, number 7 Vista Street, Kensington. Lot 10.3.5, proposed home business, dog grooming. Lot 227, number 49 Kilkenny Circle, Waterford. Item 10.4.1, listing of payments, April 2024. And item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements, April 2024. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Councillor Brenda Abrandis to second. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? That's a no. Okay. So I use my powers under the standing orders to declare those items carried unanimously. For the benefit of the minutes, those items have just been passed by exception resolution in accordance with clause 5.5 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders Local Law 2007, and the officers' recommendations have been accepted by council. We'll now move on to the reports that have been identified to be withdrawn for discussion this evening. The first of which is item 10.3.1, entitled Major Land Transaction, Collier Park Village and Contract of Sale. We have an officer recommendation before us. I have not received any amended motions or alternative motions. I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. Is there someone who is willing to second? Councillor Coveney, thank you. All right, I'll say a few words since we've got a seconder. So, councillors, we're approaching the conclusion of a transaction that has been years in the making. Our vote on this item tonight will determine the future of Collier Park Retirement Village and, I hope, safeguard the long-term sustainability of the village as well as ensure the quality of life and amenity enjoyed by the village residents. As many of you know, the city has owned and operated Collier Park Village since 1986, and it probably made sense for local governments to own and operate retirement villages back then. But, as we all know, things have changed substantially during the subsequent 38 years. People are living longer and there are greater expectations as to the services and amenities available in a modern retirement village. It's fair to say that retirement village living is a specialised sector today and one that falls outside the core business of local government. The city does not have the expertise or the financial resources to make significant improvements to Collier Park Village. We don't have the capacity to provide the right mix of accommodation and services to deliver contemporary standards of retirement living. So under the circumstances, the question before us is this: if the city does not have the expertise or the financial resources to deliver contemporary standards of retirement living at Collier Park Village in the long term, then who does? And so, at the March 2023 Ordinary Council meeting, Council resolved last year to commence a request for proposal process for Collier Park Village. As you know, we received a number of proposals in response to that request, and following the evaluation of the proposals received in response to the process, Council unanimously endorsed Amana Living as the preferred proponent for the transfer of Collier Park Village at the October 2023 Ordinary Council meeting. Councillors, Amana Living is well known in the aged care and retirement village sector as a quality operator. They've taken the time to attend the village to meet the residents and give presentations to the residents introducing themselves. More than that, Amana Living has given assurances to the village residents concerning the security of tenure that they have, which many of you are aware was a very understandable point of concern when this process began, especially for residents who are presently on short-term rental agreements. I understand that this assurance in particular from Amana Living has generated a very significant amount of goodwill from the residents, and we have heard deputations from the President of the Collier Park Residents Committee, Mr Peter Quinn, who's here in the audience tonight, signalling the resident support for this transaction. And I would like to thank Mr Quinn for taking the time to attend what has been a number of council meetings now and for keeping council informed of the residents' views. Thank you for that, Mr Quinn. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge the village staff, that's Genevieve Mack and her team. They do a remarkable job, and from my interactions with the village residents, it's clear that Genevieve and her team take the time to get to know the residents, to look after them, and ensure that the village is a happy and a friendly place to live. I'd also like to acknowledge the cooperation that we've received on this journey from the State Government's Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage for working through the land tenure issues with us. That was a big part in making this transaction possible. So councillors, in conclusion, we've all agreed that the city must transfer Collier Park Village to an experienced retirement village operator if we're to secure the long-term sustainability of the village. We've all agreed that Amana Living is the preferred proponent for the transfer of Collier Park Village, and the village residents have told us that they support the proposed transaction and they're excited to have Amana Living take the reins going forward. The proposed transaction is the right way forward for the city, for our residents and for the community we serve. The proposed transaction will ensure that Collier Park Village is a vibrant, happy and sustainable home for our seniors for decades to come. Councillors, let's bring this home. I commend the officer recommendation to you. That's me. And with that, remind me, who was the seconder? Mr. Councillor Coveney. Councillor Coveney, the floor is yours if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be very brief. I support everything you've just said. It was put very well. This is financially and socially sensible. We can see from the publicly available briefing that the transaction will free up a net amount of about $16 million of reserve funds, and the city will no longer incur an annual operating loss of $500,000, which will grow in future years. The city also avoids future estimated required capital expenditure of $200 million, or up to $200 million. Last week, we did hear from Peter Quinn, the President of the Collier Park Residents Committee, and we've heard from him on a number of occasions, and he described this as being the perfect fit He asked for council's continued support, and he said that the residents were looking forward to welcoming Marna Living to the family. So I endorse this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the officer recommendation? No? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in support? No. Okay. There being no debate, there's no need for me to wind up. I'll simply put this item to the vote. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to the next item to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, which is item 10.3.3, entitled Local Heritage Survey Review. I've declared a financial proximity and impartiality interest in this item, so I will leave the chamber for the duration of this item. I'd like to invite the Deputy Mayor to come and take my place as presiding member. And once this item is done, it'd be lovely if someone could come and get me. I'll see you all soon.
For the record, the Mayor Milner has left the chamber at 6:31. Councillors, we are at item 10.3.3. The officer recommendation is that council advertises the draft Local Heritage Survey 2024 at attachment A and proposed place records at attachment B. Can I have a mover? No mover? Oh, Councillor Navard, thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Councillor Navard, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll really just suggest that I put it so for council to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor D'Souza, do you wish to speak? No. Is there anybody who wishes to speak against the motion?
Thank you, presiding member. I'd actually like to move that this item be deferred to a later date.
That's a procedural motion. Yes. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Nick Coveney. Do you wish to state your reasons, Councillor Brenda Brandis?
Yes, thank you, presiding member. I'll keep it fairly brief. Over the last week, we've received quite a lot of emails, and we've had engagement with quite a few members of the community with regard to this item, both for and against the item as it currently stands. I realise that this is going to go out for community consultation engagement and then we'll come back. But concerns have been raised with regard both for and against. Identified properties for this heritage survey, and also with regard to methodology in regard to classifying properties. I am concerned personally, and also I understand that some of my fellow councillors also would appreciate a further workshop with regard to this item, and following that workshop, then this item be then brought back to council for approval for advertising and consultation with the community. So for that reason, I'd actually propose that this item gets deferred until a workshop's been completed, and I'd propose that this item be brought back in August at the Ordinary Council meeting for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Being a procedural motion, there's no further debate on the matter. I put it to the vote. Thank you, and I declare that procedural motion carried, so the deferral is passed. If somebody could please call Greg back to the meeting. Thank you. So for the record, that was unanimously. So Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Brenda Brandis, Councillor Waugh, Councillor Prendeville, Councillor Navard, Councillor Choi and Councillor Coveney. Thank you.
Thank you to the Deputy Mayor for taking my seat there for that item. We now turn to item 10.3.6, which is entitled Proposed Change of Use, Multiple Dwelling to Holiday Accommodation, Lot 2, Number 2, 45 Mary Street, Como. I do note that Councillor Waugh has a proximity interest, so I'll just give her a moment to exit the chamber. All right, so we have an officer recommendation on item 10.3.6 before us. We also have an amended motion that's been submitted by Councillor Jennifer Navard. I'll start by asking if anyone wants to move the officer recommendation to get the ball rolling. I guess I will. Is there a seconder? I don't think you can be seconder and then move your amended motion. Is there someone who's willing to second this item? Councillor Prendeville, thank you. I don't have much to say, folks. I see that the officers have recommended that this be approved, but I also see that Councillor Navard has an amended motion that I assume that she'll move after Councillor Prendeville speaks as seconder. So, Councillor Prendeville, anything to say as seconder? No? Councillor Navard, would you like to move your amended motion at this stage?
By way of explanation, this is a really minor change, and
Councillor Navard, I might get you to begin by simply reading what the amended motion is, and then we'll see a seconder. And if there's a seconder for your amended motion, then you'll have the opportunity to give your reasons.
Thank you. Am I reading it, or you?
You read the amended motion at this point, but perhaps you can say jump to paragraph 2 of the officer recommendation, and then you can read the section in red that is your amendment, so that we all know what it is.
Great. Okay, so we're up to the second clause, and we're at the very end of that particular paragraph, and the addition is simply that guests be advised how to orientate bins to ensure collection.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Is there anyone who would like to second Councillor Navard's amended motion? Councillor Choi, thank you. Councillor Navard, the floor is yours to give the reasons.
Oh, thank you. Look, it was just a small amendment which just came from the fact that my observation of the short-term rental up our street, on a couple of occasions the bin had been placed on the verge on time by the exiting tenants but had not been emptied. And on the second occasion, when I had a good look, I noticed the bin was round the wrong way. And so if people are not familiar with the metropolitan system for emptying the bins, then there's always a small risk that the bin won't get emptied. And so that inclusion was the only reason it's there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillor Choi, you're the seconder of the amended motion. Would you like to speak?
Yes, just briefly. Thanks, Mr Mayor. I agree with this minor amendment, as although it may seem unnecessary or just common sense on the face of it, I understand where Councillor Navard is coming from with her amendment, in that if you're a visitor to the area and you come from a different scheme, especially from overseas, the orientation of bins may be different. So I think it's only a minor thing to add in there. I understand that landlords of these properties or managers have guidelines for guests anyway, so it's just an extra thing just to put in there so people understand, when to empty the bin and how to do it if necessary in that particular complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillors, is there anyone who opposes the amended motion? Councillor D'Souza.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor. Does the orientation of bins actually need a motion, or can that just be done by the city staff advising the residents?
Ms Shaw, can I send that your way?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the officer recommendation included an updated waste management plan, and we could include it as part of that. But if the council would like to have it specified in the resolution, it can be dealt with that way. So it's here, not there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, anyone who... Oh, Councillor Coveney, question or speaking?
Question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From my reading, and I may be wrong, there wasn't anything mentioned from the feedback from nearby residents about issues with bins. Is that correct? Is there any complaints about the bins at present?
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, there was no comment in relation to the bins being collected or how they were oriented on the lot.
Thank you. Councillor Choi? I assume it's a question since you've spoken.
Yes, that's right, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. So just clarifying, this is in relation to holiday accommodation, not from just residents using bins generally. So this is in relation to visitors using bins that may come from other areas. Is that correct?
Ms Shaw?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So this is to do with occupants of the short-term rental accommodation. When they put the bins out onto the street, the revision to the the amended motion would provide for wording inserted into the waste management plan that specifies that the guests are to be advised about how they would orientate bins to ensure collection. So we would go into detail about which way the bin needs to face on the curb line to ensure it's collected.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. I guess I'll ask one question. Is there any reason why the amended motion might be problematic if it was to be passed?
I think you know.
Thank you. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak either for or against the amended motion? No. I don't think there was any actual debate. There were just questions. Councillor Navard, is there anything that you'd want to say in response to the questions that have been asked? All right. Then I'll put the amended motion to the vote. So just for clarity, councillors, we're voting on Councillor Navard's amended motion. We're not voting on the substantive. This is the amended motion that, if carried, will amend the substantive. So, councillors, please cast your votes on Councillor Navard's amended motion. And I'm waiting on one more vote. It's not mine, is it, Governance? No? Oh, of course, we're missing Councillor Waugh, my bad. Yes. All right, so that was carried unanimously. So Councillor Navard's amended motion has been carried. The officer recommendation has now been amended in line with Councillor Navard's amended motion. We return to this debate on the substantive, albeit amended motion. Does anyone wish to speak against the substantive motion, the officer recommendation as amended? No? Does anyone else wish to speak in favour? No? There hasn't really been any debate. I was the mover. I won't really say anything by way of winding up. I'll simply put the officer recommendation as amended by Councillor Navard's amended motion to the vote. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Could someone please retrieve Councillor Waugh for the next item? And I'll just pause momentarily so that, that Councillor Waugh can rejoin us. Okay, we now turn to item 10.3.7, entitled Response to Notice of Motion, Hooning Along the Peninsula. We have an amended motion from Councillor Coveney on this one, but I haven't received any alternative motions. There's an officer recommendation before us. Would anyone like to move the officer recommendation? I guess I will to get the ball rolling. Is there anyone who wishes to second the officer recommendation? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Okay, I am in general support of this motion. We have an issue with hooning on the South Perth foreshore. It is impinging on the quiet enjoyment of our residents. I won't speak at length because we're all familiar with these issues and they have been raised in this council chamber beforehand. Councillor D'Souza, anything to say, seconder?
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Councillor Coveney, if you'd like to move your amended motion, I invite you to do so. And if you could read out the, perhaps the paragraph 1, how your amended motion is different from the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I seek to move my amended motion to 10.3.7. The single amendment is to paragraph 1, where I've removed the words "the western portion of the" before Millers Pool car park, and the effect is that instead of just a portion of the car park being closed after dark, it's in fact the whole car park that is closed after dark.
Thank you. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to second Councillor Coveney's amended motion? Councillor Waugh, thank you. Councillor Coveney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support, by and large, what's put forward by the administration, except for this slight amendment. This is because residents are still telling me, notwithstanding the hooning has slowed down, it does still continue. And so my view is closing just a portion hasn't worked entirely. I accept that this isn't just a local government issue and there's no silver bullet, and we do need the support of the police and the state government, but we do need to do everything we can within our own powers to curb this and try everything. I accept that recreational users who might be doing the right thing would be adversely affected by a full closure. However, given the car park closure is from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m, I'd be surprised if there would be many cyclists or runners or other users impacted, save for a few fishermen. And I don't know that they're from the area in any event. And in any event, really, there are a number of car parks nearby, both the jet ski car park and other car parks along the foreshore. My view is we ultimately need to put the residents that live in South Perth first and who live in South Perth first. And my view is people have the right to enjoy the quiet enjoyment of their own home, and that's not happening at the moment. So my view is that this slight amendment might make things a bit better for them.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillor Waugh, you're the seconder for the amended motion. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'm speaking in support of Councillor Coveney's amended motion. I am aware that the residents located in and around the peninsula have been affected by hoons for what is now an extended period, and that our 2 Mill Point Ward councillors have both spent significant time, care and attention to identifying measures that can be implemented that are practical and within the power and the control of the city. I note that there's been little engagement by police and no response from the local member to date, and as such it has fallen to us as the local government to address as best we can. It is my view that half measures are not sufficient, and we as a city must make a stand to demonstrate that we will not tolerate this kind of behaviour. In light of the extensive and ongoing issues experienced by those residents, we ought to support the full closure of the car park during those limited evening hours for a 3-month period to demonstrate to those hoons that this city is not a place for speeding, burnouts and excessive noise from vehicles at all hours of the night, preventing residents from sleeping in their homes. So it is my view that we as a council ought to do everything that we are able to protect the amenity of the residential areas within our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillors, so the debate is on Councillor Coveney's amended motion at the moment. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against Councillor Coveney's amended motion? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't want to speak against, but I do want to speak to it, please.
Fire away.
I support the amended motion, albeit we only received it a few hours before the meeting, to consider any potential implications. I have been thinking about that in those couple of hours. As although closing the car park has proven extremely helpful in reducing the hooning issue in the peninsula area, I have received complaints from residents within the city over the closure of the public car park. And even though to date it has only been a portion of it, these complaints have still come in. So now with the amended motion before us proposing to close the entire car park, I'm just wondering if we're going to get further residents' complaints about that. especially when there hasn't been any sort of prior public knowledge or feedback enabled with the full closure. So with the entire car park being closed every evening. So understanding that the period for the closure as amended will still only be for no more than 3 months, I will support the amendment in support of the affected residents for the reasons that Councillor Coveney and Deputy Mayor Waugh have already espoused. But now also in respect to this full closure, if endorsed by Council, I wish to move a further amendment about signage. So I will leave it there and come back to it if it's endorsed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak in favour of the amended motion? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a question.
Far away.
Could the administration please advise the reasoning for initially only closing the western portion as opposed to this amendment which closes the entire Millers Pool car park? So was there a reason with regard to utilisation or possibly that just the western portion was the only adverse area affecting anti-social behaviour? Thank you.
Ms Amprima?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So as you're aware, the western portion of the car park is closed all the time at the moment with concrete barriers. Our observation from implementing that arrangement is that it's substantially reduced the undesirable behaviour in the area to a level that whilst there is still some happening, it's probably not significantly different from what we would see in other portions of the city. We are aware that there are users of that car park outside of the proposed hours, and the recommendation to only close off the western portion was the administration considered a balance between allowing some of those general users to have access 24 hours a day and minimising the opportunity for other people that we don't want to be using the area. The small numbers that we have observed using the area are also using areas along the Esplanade and the Scented Gardens car park. So we're still getting people that are displaying undesirable behaviour in small numbers. And if we close that car park, we're still likely to see some in the area regardless. So the administration considered that it was a balance between general public use of the area and dealing with the matter under discussion.
Thank you, Ms Amprima. Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that response, Ms Amprimo. Just a couple of follow-up questions. I think you've slightly touched on it for me. So with regard to the closure of the entire Millers Pool car park, does the administration, the first question is, does the administration have any issues with that and with this amendment? And the second question is just with regard to, have we seen the antisocial behaviour moved on to other car parks along the foreshore?
Ms Amprima?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of implementing the recommendation, if council resolve to adopt the amendment, it doesn't have any material impact on doing that in terms of cost or practical delivery. We are aware that there is general behaviour in many parts of the city and other areas of the metropolitan Perth where people gather with cars that make noises and drive in a manner that is maybe less than attractive to some. Our observation is that whilst there is still some in the Mill Point area, it's not significantly different from what we see elsewhere now. It's probably people are more aware of it because the issue was much worse before we put in the concrete barriers.
Thank you, Ms Amprima. Councillors, is there anyone else who wishes to speak either for or against the amended motion from Councillor Coveney? No. Okay. I don't think there's been a little bit of debate. Councillor Coveney, is there anything that you wish to say by way of winding up on the amended motion?
Just briefly, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to note that the complaints I've received about what we put in place is from the homes themselves, which I think is a good thing if they're complaining. And secondly, those that don't like the fact the car park or portion of it has been closed for 24/7. But of course, what's being proposed now is from 10 to 5, which means that during the day, when most people use it, in fact, it is open, and I suspect those complaints will stop. As the city's indicated, ultimately it's a balance between recreational users and not impacting them, who are doing the right thing, and also residents. And my view is, if it comes to balancing the needs of a few fishermen that may not live in the area versus the thousands of residents that live on the peninsula getting a good night's sleep, I'm backing the peninsula residents, so that's why I support my amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Okay, councillors, I'm about to put Councillor Coveney's amended motion to the vote. It's not the substantive motion, it's not the officer recommendation, it's the amended motion from Councillor Coveney, which if passed will in turn amend the substantive, the officer recommendation. So with that, councillors, please cast your votes. Governance, are we missing one more? Councillor Nevada? Yes, okay, that was unanimous, thank you. So Councillor Coveney's amended motion has been carried unanimously, and so the officer recommendation, which was the substantive motion, has now been amended in accordance with the amended motion. We're now returning to the debate on the substantive motion. Councillor Choi, you foreshadowed that you wanted to move an amended motion. I haven't got anything in writing before me. Could you tell us what your amended motion would be, please?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. And mine amended motion only came into play if that other amendment was endorsed. So now that it has been endorsed by council, so what I'd like to do now with the substantive motion is amend it further by adding at the end of paragraph 1 a comma after months, and with a temporary sign to be erected on site, clearly communicating the new car park closing time and requesting vehicles to vacate the car park prior to 10 p.m.
All right, I ask simply because I don't think this has been distributed in writing. Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. So at paragraph 1, where the substantive motion now is close the Millers Pool car park 11 between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. every day for a period no less than 3 months, add a comma with a temporary sign to be erected on site, clearly communicating the new car park closing time and requesting vehicles to vacate the car park prior to 10 p.m.
All right, and I see we've got that on the screen now, so good. Is there anyone who wishes to second Councillor Choi's amended motion? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Councillor Choi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And as I was saying before, this amendment has only come about because of the original substantive motion now being amended to include not just one portion of the car park, but the entire car park, Millers Pool car park 11. And so with that, I believe a sign is necessary. So there is an inadvertent locking out of vehicles at night with people maybe parked there and gone for a walk around the river or doing recreational fishing or boating or whatever, coming back in the evening and they've actually been locked out. And then obviously that creating unwarranted extra work for city officers and potentially add additional costs to ratepayers. I understand other local governments who have closed their public car parks for similar reasons have, for the same or similar reasons, erected signage so that officers or contractors having to attend after hours on site to assist with the release of people's vehicles from those car parks can, I believe, also charge for that service as there has been official notification of the closure.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, anything to say as seconder?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this amendment is appropriate. We do need the transparency and the communication with the public using the Millers Pool car park, so highly appropriate that we do have signage out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the amended motion? Councillor Coveney.
I just have a question, Mr Mayor.
Please.
I know Ms Choi was, I think, critical of me circulating my amendment today. I'm receiving this on the fly now. But my question is, how would the city deal with notifying people about this closure if this motion that Ms Choi is now proposing, Councillor Choi is proposing, isn't resolved?
Mr Adams or Ms Amprimo?
I'll answer.
Mr Adams.
So we're a local government. Signs is one thing we're pretty good at. Without this, we would put a sign up. Regardless of whether this was put into the motion or not, we would clearly be required to put signage up advising people of when the car park was open and when it was closing, and what we'd be doing if cars were in there when the car park was closed at 10 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr Adams. I guess I'll ask a follow-up question, and I guess I had assumed that we would provide signage notifying people that a particular car park would close at a certain time. Don't have an issue with the substance of it, but is there any reason why the drafting that's on the screen now in front of us should be problematic for any reason? And I guess that's to both Ms Amprimo and Mr Adams.
No, it's perfectly fine the way it is.
All right, great. All right, councillors, does anyone else wish to speak either for or against the amended motion? Councillor, no, you haven't spoken yet. You've asked a question. So yes, Councillor Coveney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm speaking against the motion purely because it's been indicated by the city that it's not necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Does anyone else wish to speak either for or against? No. Anything to say by way of winding up, Councillor Choi?
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. There's no sign, I understand, currently for the western portion of the car park that's closed, indicating to people that it's closed. Please correct me if I'm wrong, if there is one there, because I don't recall seeing one when I've been down there. And there's nothing noted anywhere in the officer's report about a signage, or in the recommendation. So that's why I've come up with it. If I assumed these sort of things, and I wouldn't obviously have bothered with thinking about the amendment, the further amendment, when taking into account the full car park closure that may have been endorsed, which was endorsed just earlier. So, yeah, just want to clarify that. So, thank you, and hopefully councillors will support this, just to, I guess, give it, nothing else, confirmation that it will be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. So, councillors, I'm about to put Councillor Choi's amended motion to the vote. Once again, we're not voting on the substantive motion. We're voting on Councillor Choi's amended motion. So, with that, please cast your votes. All right, so Councillor Choi's amended motion has been carried 6 votes to 2. For the benefit of the minutes and those listening via YouTube, the votes were as follows. Those in favour were myself, Mayor Milner, Councillor Brenda Brandis, Councillor Waugh, Councillor Prendeville, Councillor Navard and Councillor Choi. Those against were Councillor Coveney and Councillor Souza. So, we're now returning once again to the substantive motion, which is the officer recommendation, as amended by Councillor Coveney's amended motion and as amended by Councillor Choi's amended motion. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the substantive motion, either for or against, who hasn't spoken already? No. Oh, Councillor Prendeville, right on the buzzer.
Sorry, apologies. I just had a question.
Please.
This CCTV camera that's currently located there, is that going to stay there for the period of, like, for the entirety of this time? Because I know it's for a period of no less than 3 months. So will it be located there almost permanently for now?
Ms Amprimo?
So the way the resolution is worded is for the CCTV camera to be there for no specific period of time. So we've had it down there for an extended period of time already, but that is the city's mobile CCTV camera. So the resolution is worded in a way that if we need to take it to other hotspots around the city, we can remove it from there and just put it back periodically. So it's separate to the no less than 3 months for item 1. So it's a standalone, undertake periodic surveillance, so it's not for a specified period of time, which allows us to use the camera elsewhere in the city if we need to.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillor Choi, question or speaking?
Just a question, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So in regards to the, looking for the right page here in the agenda, to the trial of the noise cameras, which I understand that the city at this point in time aren't recommending for various reasons, but also, also including cost. Is the city still planning to follow what may be happening in other districts that are sort of commencing the trial, just to see about the efficacy and also in case anything changes here in terms of legislation or state government funding opportunities and that sort of thing? I just want to know, is this like the end of that, or does the city still intend to monitor it?
Ms Amprimo? Mr Adams, apologies.
So we did have a conversation with Bayside Council over East, who were trialling, we're going to enter into a trial of the cameras. So we will follow up with them to see how that trial goes. Obviously, there was significant expense involved in those cameras, and they were doing it for slightly different purposes to what the purposes would be here. Their issue was around they also needed to do it in conjunction with some changes to legislation. There wasn't much point in doing it in terms of obviously using it for police purposes if the legislation didn't allow it to be used for those purposes. So again, we'll monitor what goes on over there, and then I guess if the results of those prove to be a positive deterrent, then we might bring something back at a later date. But yeah, it all depends on how that goes ahead.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillors, does anyone else wish to speak either for or against the amended substantive motion? No. Okay. I was the original mover. I've nothing much to say by way of winding up. I'll simply put the twice amended officer recommendation substantive motion to the vote. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Okay, that concludes item 10. We move on to item 11, which is applications for a leave of absence. Does anyone have a leave of absence application that they'd like to submit this evening? Councillor Coveney.
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. I won't be here from the 31st of May to the 10th of June. It won't interrupt any council meetings or briefings, but I won't be available for the next CEO workshop.
All right, so just to confirm, that's the 31st of May through to the 10th of June?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Anyone else? No. Okay. In that case, I'll call for someone to move a notice of motion that the leave of absence application received from Councillor Coveney for the period of 31 May 2024 to 10 June 2024 inclusive be granted. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Seconded by Councillor De Souza. Does anyone oppose, councillors? No. Okay. Then I use my powers under the standing orders to declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. Item 12.1 is a notice of motion from Councillor Jennifer Navard entitled Appointment to Committees. We have an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received any amended or alternative motions. Councillor Navard, I assume you'd like to move your motion. Very good. I'll just see if there's a seconder. And if there is, the floor will be yours to give your reasons. Councillor Brenda Abrandis is the seconder. Thank you. Councillor Navard, the floor is yours.
Thank you. As I've pointed out, I limited my volunteering on committees in October because of personal reasons, but indicated that I would still like to join committees at a later point. And so my request was now to join the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee and the Chief Executive Officer's Evaluation Committee. I'm vitally interested in both of these matters, and I'm undertaking training for the Chief Executive Officer Evaluation Committee, and audit is something I'm particularly interested in. I guess that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillor Brenda Brandis, anything to say, seconder? All right. Does anyone wish to speak either for or against this notice of motion? Nope. There being no debate, I'll simply put the item to the vote. Councillors, please cast your votes. I think I'm waiting for one more vote. All right, I assume you're voting in favour? Oh, it's Councillor Choi, apparently. All right, that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 12.2, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Blake D'Souza entitled Manning Bike Track. Now, there's a notice of motion from Councillor D'Souza himself. There's a suggested officer recommendation appearing at page 84 of the agenda. And I've also received an amended motion from Councillor Jennifer Navard. Councillor Navard, am I correct in understanding that this amended motion only applies to the suggested officer recommendation, not the primary notice of motion from Councillor D'Souza?
That would be correct.
Thank you. Okay. So, Councillor D'Souza, I assume you'd like to move a motion. Can you let us know if you're moving the notice of motion appearing at page 82 of the agenda, or the suggested officer recommendation appearing at page 84, please?
My original motion, Mr. Mayor, so the former from what you've mentioned.
All right. Can you please read that notice of motion then, and then I'll see about a seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion is as follows, that Council, in relation to the tender accepted at the 26th March 2024 Ordinary Council meeting, which is RFT 10 of 2023, 1, instruct the CEO that the official project title of Manning Bike Track is to be used going forward in all contexts, including, but not limited to, in the following contexts: signage once the project is complete, public consultation, promotion on the city's website, social and print media channels, and official city documentation. And 2, prior to the construction commencing and after community consultation, to instruct the CEO to hold a city-run workshop for elected members to consider and provide feedback on the final design. The successful tenderer is to be invited to the said workshop.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to second the notice of motion? Councillor Coveney? Thank you. Councillor D'Souza, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion more fully complements the tender Council accepted at the March 2024 meeting and more fully reflects the intent of the motion I put forward in August 2021 to initiate this project. For Clause 1, the City has advised that a wide range of users can use this track, including BMX riders. The broadening of the name from purely Pum Track will allow the broadest possible cross-section of the community to become actually aware of and utilise this facility. B, the broadening of the name also reflects the hybrid character of the track, with the extra component being bike jumps. C, the across-the-board usage of the name is also for consistency and clarity. And D, usage of the name Manning will create linkages with the existing Manning Skate Park, and also it's an asset along Manning Road. 3, For clause 2, councillors have had similar workshops on previous on similar scale projects, such as proposed dog parks and foreshore upgrades. This workshop will enable visibility for councillors to relay any community concerns prior to final construction commencing. Councillors, I would have thought this is a relatively uncontentious item. In essence, the difference between what I'm proposing and what the suggested alternative by the officers is the timing of the naming. So I want to name it the Manning Bike Track now. Other options, including what Councillor Navarre is proposing, are more open-ended and might result in the name Pump Track later. For me, naming it a pump track will narrow the scope of people who are involved in the consultation. If people receive a piece of consultation, a letter in their mailbox, for example, which seeks interest in commenting on a pump track or a bike track, I'll hazard a guess more people will respond to a bike track. Pump track is the technical term, but it is a more constraining term. My goal with this, as has been my goal from the start with this project, is to get the broadest possible cross-section of users to use this facility. And by settling on the name now, which is the first and only time, the last time this matter will sort of come to council, we are signalling to the community this is the name we've set on, and will sort of broaden the funnel for potential respondents to the design consultation. Words and language do matter, and bike track for me is a more inclusive and accessible term, and I want the broadest possible consultation. I won't say anything more. I think it's a fairly simple proposition with a sound basis, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sousa. Councillor Coveney, you're the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be brief. We've got the Manning Markets, we've got the Manning Skate Track. To me, it makes sense that in the same location we'd have the Manning Bike Track. To me, the name sounds cool and more about what it does. I don't ride BMX, but it now makes me want to do backflips at the venue because it sounds cool and sounds like I can go and ride my bike there. To me, when I think of pump track, I think of those Good Life body pump classes. So to me, it's confusing. So that's why I support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the notice of motion? Councillor Navarre.
My only concern with Councillor De Sousa's proposal is that I think we're closing off the opportunity to look at a name that might sound a little bit more dynamic than Manning Bike Track. But at the same time, I have no objection to the notion that if that's what people want, well, so be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navarre. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, speaking for or against?
A question, Mr Mayor.
Please.
Could the administration please advise if there's been any preliminary discussion with regard to a possible name, and how many stakeholders might have been consulted or discussed with regard to a possible name?
Ms Shaw?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. No, there hasn't been any consultation to date. We're expecting community consultation to occur on the design in July.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, anyone who wishes to speak either for or against the notice of motion? Councillor Choi, and if you could let us know if you're speaking for or against.
I'm speaking for, but I also want to ask about the foreshadowed amended motion that's on the table, like how that comes into play, because I appreciate Councillor De Sousa's intent with his amended motion. However, as there could be naming opportunities down the track, which I think has been raised before, that haven't obviously been considered or explored yet because it's too early, I am not keen to make it Manning Bike Track forevermore, and I understand what Councillor De Sousa was saying, that he's happy for that to be reconsidered down the track, but that's not, in my view, how the motion has been worded. So purely from that sort of perspective, I certainly don't want to be endorsing something that maybe cannot be changed other than by another resolution of council, potentially, with undoing what we may be endorsing this evening with this motion. So maybe get some clarity around that in process-wise with the motion, with what it actually says and what we're actually voting on and what that means for down the track. But also, also for process, how Councillor Navarre's amended motion might come into play. Thank you.
So just to clarify, Councillor Choi, what is the question you're asking?
So my understanding, thank you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding of the wording of the motion is that if Councillor endorses the name Manning Bike Track, that's it basically. So until, because I think it mentions in there about, you know, it will be opened as the Manning Bike Track. So although it's been said that, or we can reconsider it, I'm not sure how we can reconsider that in the terms this motion has been couched. So I just wanted to get some clarity from that.
Should I send that to Mr. Adams? Yes.
So I think our view is pretty clear. If the notice of motion is, if it's resolved that we go forward with this notice of motion, then it's clear that it will be called the Manning Bike Track going forward in all contexts. So that's what it will be called. So we won't do any consultation regarding the name going forward because it will be called the Manning Bike Track.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Councillors, anyone who wishes to speak either for or against the notice of motion? Councillor Waugh.
Thank you. I'm speaking for. So in August of 2021, Councillor De Souza brought his successful motion for the BMX track to be installed at George Burnett Reserve for the benefit of the community. And since then, he has followed its progress quite dutifully and has long awaited the commencement of construction. This motion to name the Manning Bike Track is reflective of Councillor De Souza's vision in carrying out his commitment to the community for which we all dutifully serve. And it is clear that Councillor De Souza has put a great deal of consideration into the proposed name, and the selected name, in my view, does promote a sense of ownership and connection to the space by those members of our community who are most likely to use the track. So in this way, I do think that it can enhance the community spirit and promote a positive image of the area. In respect to the second part of the motion, that is to hold a city-run workshop, I'm again supportive of the motion because first it provides a platform for collaboration and discussion to ensure that Council's vision for the project is realised, and it allows for diverse viewpoints and expertise to be shared, leading to a more comprehensive consideration of the final design. In this way, it encourages transparency and inclusivity in the decision-making processes. Second, by gathering feedback from the elected members in a structured workshop setting, it does ensure that all perspectives are considered, and this can lead to well-informed decisions that reflect the needs and preferences of the community. And third, a workshop of this nature encourages active engagement with the council and fosters a deeper understanding of the project, whilst promoting constructive dialogue among stakeholders. So ultimately, it's my view that Councillor De Souza's motion reflects his strategic vision and provides for our community in an inclusive manner that enables the community engagement, identity building and effective decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillors, is there anyone else who would like to speak either for or against who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking against this item primarily because the administration have made it quite clear that consultation should be part of this process in achieving the naming right. However, the further amended motion proposed does articulate that we've used the word pump track and also the community are currently using the naming of Manning Bike Track as an informal community name. So from my view, the community should be consulted with regard to the name. The fact that we're using one name now and then there's an informal name currently being used in the community, I think that's quite appropriate. But a formal process with regard to consultation, with regard to naming, should be given due consideration. I think that the consideration of all the community needs to be taken into account with regard to the naming. It is an important part of the process for them, and we should give that due consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Councillors, is there anyone else who wishes to speak either for or against to the notice of motion who hasn't already spoken? I think you've already spoken, Councillor Choi. Are you asking a question?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, just the second part of my last question was just a clarification around the process for amendments. Like I understand with the Hooning motion, there was an amendment that was brought before the substantive was voted on. Is that correct? And I think you're about to put this one to the vote without hearing an amendment. Is that correct?
Well, if you recall, Councillor Choi, I asked Councillor Navard whether her amended motion was intended to apply to only the suggested officer recommendation if that was moved. And Councillor Navard confirmed that that was indeed the case. Councillor D'Souza moved the notice of motion appearing on page 82, not the suggested officer recommendation appearing at page 84. So I'm assuming that Councillor Navard doesn't want to move her amended motion because it wouldn't make sense. But Councillor Navard, do you have any amended motion that you wish to move?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thanks very much. Councillors, is there anyone else who wishes to speak either for or against the notice of motion who hasn't already spoken? No. Okay. Councillor D'Souza, if you'd like to rebut any of the arguments made during the debate, you're welcome to do so now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the way I've envisioned the consultation, the workshop, has always been in terms of a design workshop. So how do we get people involved in the design workshop is by getting them to understand what we are actually building. So basically, to reiterate what I was saying, a pump track is a technical term. Most people who I've liaised with don't know what a pump track is unless they already use a facility like that. So if we want the consultation to be meaningful and to capture the broadest possible range of people, the only option is to name it a bike track, and that's what I'm proposing. As regards to Councillor Choi's point, look, who knows, maybe it will change as a name in 10 or 20 years, but this is a very simple proposal to name a facility. I think we have to be decisive here and not overcomplicated. I've given sound reasons, and I think it can stand on its own merits, and I encourage councillors to support my motion.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Councillors, I'm putting item 12.2 to the vote. Please cast your votes. And once again, I think I'm waiting on one more vote. Aha, all right. So, Councillor D'Souza's notice of motion has been carried 6 votes to 2. For the benefit of the minutes and those listening via YouTube, those who voted in favour were myself, Mayor Milner, Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Waugh, Councillor Prendeville, Councillor Choi and Councillor Coveney. Those against were Councillor Brenda Abrandis and Councillor Navard. Thank you, councillors. That brings us to item 13, which is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice. That's nil for this evening. Item 13.2 is questions from members. Councillors, do we have any questions for the administration this evening? Councillor Choi.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for clarifying on that previous item as well. I did get a bit lost there with the process. Now, with regards to the bridges, quite a few elected members have been receiving emails this month ahead, I think, of this meeting and maybe the next budget meeting on the bridges. I'm just wondering if there's any indication, any information that the city is able to provide so that we can pass it on to residents.
Ms Amprimo, am I sitting that in your direction?
So, as you may recall, in the budget workshops, a number of options were presented to the elected members. From those discussions, what was ultimately included was a sum to replace the shorter of the 2 bridges in FRP and make the other bridge to a bird sanctuary. So that is what currently is in the draft capital works budget based on council's feedback at the workshop.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Any further questions? Councillor Choi.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you through the Chair to Director Amprimo. I just want to also mention May Gibbs. I was down at the Historical Society recently for their commemoration during Volunteers Week, and we got talking, as we always do when I'm down there, about May Gibbs. I'm just wondering what the update is, if there's any further works that are being due to be carried out down there in terms of that commemorative piece that was in principle supported, I believe, by council back in May 2021 in relation to the May Gibbs Garden and around that area I think it's been included in the place-based plan. Thank you.
Is that Ms Amprimo?
Yeah, I'll need to take that one on notice.
All right, thank you. Any further councillors for the administration? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In terms of the $5.5 million federal funding that we were thankfully able to retain from the RAF, can the city advise where that funding may be proposed to be going towards? Which clubs, in which areas? Thank you.
Ms Amprimo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So the funding is intended to improve the change rooms and make them more female friendly at Richardson Park, Challenger Reserve, Bill Graydon, George Burnett and Morris Mundy, and also Collier, subject to the outcome of what happens with the wasps using that area, and improved sports lighting at Richardson, Challenger and George Burnett.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillor Choi?
Yeah, my last question. Thanks, Mr Mayor. Council's request, as endorsed at the last OCM, on budget funding for the proposed high-level plan review in the Main Street precinct and Peninsula area. I'm just wondering if there's been any, is there any information that because I understand that was discussed at the last budget workshop, and I'm just wondering if there's been any further information that the city can provide, please, on that discussion. I wasn't there.
Ms Amprimo, should I send that in your direction?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. There isn't anything further following the budget workshop. We won't do any more work on that until council endorses the budget.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillors, any further questions for the administration this evening? No. Okay. All right. That brings us to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature, introduced by decision of the meeting. That's nil this evening. Item 15 is when we would close the meeting to the public if there was any reason to do so, but there's not. Which brings us to item 16, closure. So before I close tonight's meeting, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation. I declare this meeting closed at 7:32 p.m. Thank you all and good night.